everyone. So, today we are going to be talking about a very brutal case. It does involve the death, the murder and assault of a 7-year-old child. Half of this will be mostly talking about what's leading up to it, and about halfway is just going to be brutal. It's going to be disturbing, it's going to be heartbreaking, and it's really going to be disturbing right up until the end. So, if this is something that easily triggers you, cases with children, I would skip this one. But we're going to be talking about Sherrice Iverson, what happened to her, and what came after her death, because her case did lead to some acts being introduced. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Links that I use for research will be down below, like always. I encourage you to look into this case if it's something you can stomach, so maybe you can understand it a bit more. This is going to be a very condensed version of it. And let's kind of get into it, because I want to tell you about little Sherrice. So, like I said, this is going to be the heartbreaking and gruesome story of the murder of a 7-year-old girl named Sherrice. Sherrice was an intelligent second grader who enjoyed learning and dreamed of becoming a nurse, police officer, or dancer. So, how could this have happened to someone so bright? Well, Sherrice's father, Leroy Iverson, was wary about babysitters. So because of this, he always took Sherrice and her 14-and-a-half-year-old brother, Harold, with him when he went gambling just across the Nevada state line. And he did this so often that it became a family tradition. And this definitely was not uncommon for them. On the early hours of May 25th, 1997, the three of them, ended up at the Prima Donna Resort and Casino, which is located in Primm, Nevada, a hot desert city that is about 40 miles from Las Vegas. Leroy had packed the kids in their 91 white Dodge van the night before at 8 p.m. and departed Los Angeles. He wanted to meet the Memorial Day traffic, and it was just a little after midnight when they arrived. Leroy would tell Harold that he was in charge of Sherrice, and then gave them each $5 to play arcade games. Leroy would spend the evening gambling. So, several times that night, there would be a security guard that would have to tell Leroy that his children were wandering. And as we would come to find out, he would not heed that warning. Twice that night, guards would have to bring Sherrice to Leroy, once being after they went across the street to Buffalo Bill's casino. They left the casino they were at to go to a different one. While this was going on, two men named Jeremy Strohmeyer, who was 18, and David Cash Jr., who was 17, were at the same casino, escorted by David's dad. So after Cash Sr.'s brief trip turned into several poker games, the two men grew tired of waiting on Cash Sr. to finish. I will be referring to him as Cash Sr. because I don't feel like saying the entire name, so I just want to put that out there. But they grew tired of waiting on Cash Sr. to finish. And they decided to pass the time by doing some pretty despicable things. Well, the first one is just disgusting. But they decided to pee on arcade games, and after, Jeremy would talk to a 16-year-old girl who would say that she actually found him creepy. And that would not be the only girl this night that he would talk to that would find him creepy. Now, it's 3:30 a.m., and Sherrice was tired and restless, and Harold left her unattended while the father was upstairs. Sherrice was playfully throwing wet wadded paper towels with another young boy when one hit Jeremy. He threw it back, she rushed away, and for the next 11 minutes they ran around the arcade playing hide and seek. At 3:48 a.m., this is where it's gonna start getting, gruesome. So I just want to preface real quick and say that Jeremy actually told Sherrice that the one place she could hide that he could not get to her was by going into the ladies' room. And at 3:48 a.m., Sherrice can be seen entering the ladies' room on security tape. A few moments later, Jeremy is seen looking around to ensure no one is looking before he would follow her inside. David Jr. stepped in to see what Jeremy was doing in the ladies' room, and he would watch as Jeremy continued to toss wadded towels at Sherrice, who continued to or toss them back, and she seemed to be having fun at first. Um, Sherrice would end up throwing a wet floor sign at Jeremy, who seemed so enraged by this that he would hoist Sherrice with one arm between her legs and a palm over her mouth and carried her into the handicapped stall and locked the door. Jeremy said he would kill her if she didn't keep quiet. According to a taped statement he gave police, Jeremy said he removed her boots and underwear and began to sexually assault her. David went back to playing arcade games because he did not wish to become involved, but he made absolutely no effort to stop what was happening. He also did not attempt to contact police. Jeremy would come back 24 minutes later, saying he had raped and strangled Sherrice. David's only question was a disturbing one. He wanted to know if she had been aroused. I have a lot of thoughts on these two men, but I'm going to save it until the end. So, these two disgusting men spent the rest of their night at other casinos. Sherrice's body would be discovered in the bathroom around 5:30 a.m. She was in a sitting position on the toilet, and her feet were in the bowl. She had been stripped naked, and her neck was snapped. Leroy and a security officer tried to revive her, but it was too late. According to Las Vegas homicide detective Phil Ramos, this is what happened in the confession, I guess. So, while Jeremy was holding her against her will, a couple of women had walked in, and he applied more strength to keep her immobilized. When the women left the restroom, completely unaware of what was going on, he decided his only option was to strangle her. But that attempt actually did not kill her. And this is actually a quote from Phil directly. He said she was still breathing. He tells me that he put his left hand under her jaw, his right hand across the back of her skull, and snapped her neck just like you see on TV, end quote. But when he snapped her neck, that still did not kill her. So he snapped her neck again a second time. And then another quote from Phil is, Strohmeyer walked out like nothing happened. People were running out and screaming 2 minutes later. Not only was it one of the most heinous crimes we had investigated, it was one of the most cold-blooded. I still have the confession tape. He talks about it like a high school field trip. There is no emotion. He's just monotone. He didn't even get nervous. End quote. When they were going over surveillance footage, they found a clip of him, Jeremy, in valet parking talking with two girls. It was 5 minutes after he killed Sherrice. He had lifted his shirt to show he had pierced nipples, and this encounter actually made it easier to identify him. The girls were interviewed and talked about a weird guy who said he was from Long Beach. Long Beach police would arrest Jeremy a few days later as he tried to flee from his backyard. He had to be extradited to Las Vegas. No commercial airliners would fly him, so he had to go on a private jet. And a quote from Phil is, he happened to have his pilot's license. He had his own plane. We're talking about a very wealthy and privileged kid. As we were on our way back to Vegas, he is discussing all the things he knows about the plane, not the murder. End quote. Back at the interrogation room, Ramo asks, at the moment you realized she was still alive, did you try to give her CPR or think about helping her? Jeremy's response was, no. I just knew she knew who I was, so I had to kill her. As the case unfolded, his computer was found to have hundreds of images of graphic child pornography. He even made his girlfriends dress in little girl outfits. The day he was set to go to trial, it was a death penalty case. But he would not go to trial. He confessed and made a deal for a sentence of life without possibility of parole. He was put in administrative segregation away from general population. He tried to appeal his case, when the Supreme Court ruling stating that juveniles aren't cerebrally developed enough to fully understand right and wrong, he blamed his behavior on his birth parents, drug use, and predisposition for mental illness. But citing the fact that he was an 18-year-old adult at the time, as well as his racist language when describing her, his appeal was denied. So we have another quote from Phil here, and he says, "He didn't have any ally in the world. The judge tells him, 'Don't ever come in front of me again. I'll make sure you spend the rest of your rotten life in prison,'" end quote. So this crime was definitely horrific. Honestly, horrific is light for what we could call it. But this case does have a silver lining. And for one thing, the silver lining is that adoption laws in California have changed. So Jeremy was adopted, and his adopted parents did not know that his real parents did in fact have mental health issues. They were not aware of this because California had laws that you did not have to tell anybody or adopted people that are adopting that this child has a history of mental health issues. But this case led to a change where you are required to state in the medical history of the birth of the his of the oh my gosh, I'm sorry. You are required to state the medical history of the birth parents. Jeremy's adopted parents filed a lawsuit against Los Angeles County as they said they didn't know his family had a history of mental illness and wouldn't have adopted him if they had known. Jeremy's attorneys have considered an appeal to the Nevada Supreme Court, but prosecutors have said that if he's granted another hearing, they will pursue the death penalty. So it's unlikely that he will ever actually walk free again, which, thank God. Now, we are going to get into what her death brought on, the Sherrice Iverson Act. So, her murder would lead to the passage of Nevada State Assembly Bill 267, requiring people to report to authorities when they have reasonable suspicions that a child younger than 18 is being sexually assaulted/abused or violently treated. This stemmed from David Cash Jr.'s inaction. The Sherrice Iverson bill, introduced by Majority Leader Richard Perkins, provides for a fine and possible jail time for anyone who fails to report a crime of the nature that led to the creation of this bill. The bill was enacted in 2000. Her murder also led to the creation of California Assembly Bill 1422, the Sherrice Iverson Child Victim Protection Act, which added Section 152.3 to California's Penal Code, which is the duty to rescue law that requires that a person notify law enforcement if they witness a murder, rape, or any lewd or lascivious act where the child is under 14 years old. So, while what happened to her was incredibly horrific, I'm about to cry, I'm so sorry. While what happened to her was incredibly horrific, I'm gonna have to take a pause and I will be back. Okay, I think I'm good. So while what happened to her was incredibly horrific, gruesome and brutal, and she should still be alive today, some good things did come from it, like these acts. And hopefully because of these acts, we don't have any more David Cash Jr.'s running around. And if they are, they will get some jail time for their inaction, you know. It breaks my heart because looking at photos of Sherrice, she looks like the face of sunshine. Like, she looks so happy. And to just think about how young a 7-year-old really is. I have a nephew who is not much younger than her, and I can't imagine anybody hurting him. So just to imagine how young 7 years old really is, what could a 7-year-old have done to piss you off so much? Oh, she threw a wet floor sign at you. Think about how small a 7-year-old child is. Do you think a 7-year-old child is going to pick up a wet floor sign and throw it at a grown adult. Do you think that would cause enough pain for this adult to be so enraged that they would do what Jeremy did? I think Jeremy had intentions of hurting someone. And I think he had the intentions of hurting a child. And I think he saw an opportunity with Sherrice. And I think he acted on it. I think he wanted to harm Sherrice from the very beginning. I think he pretended to be her friend and to be friendly and to pretend that he wouldn't harm her so that she would relax and stick around. And I think he told her to go into the ladies' restroom because he knew that she would listen. And I think he knew what he was going to do. And I think he is a despicable human being. I think he is trash. I hope he rots. Honestly, he deserved the death penalty. I know that is a very controversial topic, but if anybody deserves the death penalty, it's people like Jeremy Strohmeyer. Thank God he will never get out because he is the scum of the earth. And the audacity to make an appeal. The audacity for him to come years later. I did not mention this, but I saw that he tried to apologize for what he did. The audacity, because he doesn't mean it. He only doesn't want to spend his life in prison anymore. He doesn't care about Sherrice, because if he had, he wouldn't have done what he did. And I think he's disgusting. Disgusting isn't a strong enough word. He's vulgar. He's vile. And you know who else is vile? David Cash Jr. To know that a child is being harmed that way, and you do nothing, is a different kind of evil. He didn't want to be involved, but he was involved the moment he stepped into that bathroom. I don't understand how he could know and say nothing, do nothing, not even attempt to get help for her. They both truly showed how little they cared. And I hope they fucking rot. I will say that I'm pretty sure David Cash Jr., there was some sort of punishment against him. I couldn't find exactly what, but I think there probably was something. Honestly, there has to have been. So I'm very sorry I didn't include that if there was, but I hope they both rot. They both deserve to have their own lives taken from them for what they did. And we can put a lot of blame on Leroy for even taking his children to a casino in the first place and then not watching them. And yes, I do think it was negligent on his part. I don't think he intended for this to happen, obviously. I think he was just negligent that night. He got very comfortable because they did this so much, and they were always okay. But that night, Sherrice was not okay. And I'm sure he lives with that for the rest of his life. I'm sure her brother lives with that for the rest of his life because he did leave her unattended. I'm sure that eats them up inside. But I don't think either of them intended for her to be harmed. Obviously, that is fully on Jeremy and David. And I think I've said all I had to say. They're both disgusting human beings. And I hope that Sherrice is resting in peace. I hope her family has been able to find some sort of solace, even though she's, no longer with them. But I'm very sorry for what happened to her. And hopefully what happened to her and the acts that were enacted in her name will keep this from happening from to other children, Thank you so much for listening to Sherrice's story. Very sorry for getting teared up. But thank you for listening, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.